Welcome to today's deep dive. I want you to imagine standing in an open field, say like 10,000 years ago.
Just completely exposed to the elements,
Exactly. And suddenly the sky just tears open. I mean, you have no idea what a thunderstorm
right?
is.
There's no meteorology, no
Nothing.
stimulus.
There's no concept of atmospheric pressure or static electricity. It's just blinding, jagged light and this deafening noise vibrating right in your
And
chest.
fire literally striking the ground around you.
Yeah.
To a mind that, can't explain those phenomena, it is pure, unadulterated chaos. You are experiencing this massive, paralyzing spike in cortisol.
Oh, I bet.
It's a level of existential terror that actually threatens your ability to function, let alone survive.
So your brain does what human brains do best, right? It tells a story.
Mm-hmm. Has to.
And that brings us to the single really potent source material we have on the desk today. It's a preview document for an upcoming book called The Gods We Made by Dick Matthews.
Which is such a provocative title.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore this fundamentally disruptive premise the text poses. What if humanity didn't discover the gods, but created them?
Framing this exactly as the author does is just so vital before we take another step.
Okay, let's unpack this right away because the text offers a very crucial caveat early on.
Right.
This book is not an attack on belief. It isn't trying to tear down anyone's faith or like engage in a theological debate about the architecture of the universe.
No, not at all.
Rather, it's an investigation into where belief originated, before it was cemented and labeled as capital T truth.
Exactly. And I'm going to guide you through the text's timeline today. We'll start by looking at early human survival mechanism.
The practical stuff.
Right, the original cognitive tools our ancestors used to navigate a wildly dangerous world. And then we'll follow that thread all the way through history to the rigid, complex power structures of organized religion.
We're basically tracking the evolution of an idea. So, to understand this premise, we have to start at the chronological beginning. We have to look at the specific reasons early humans first looked up to the sky for answers.
Yeah, the text makes a fascinating assertion right out of the gate here.
It really does. It says the creation of gods was not an act of deception. Like, no one sat around a campfire and plotted a myth just to fool the rest of the tribe.
It was a highly practical response to fear. You really have to put yourself in the physiological shoes of those early humans.
Terrified and confused.
Exactly. They were trying to explain terrifying and mysterious phenomena. We mentioned lightning, but think about disease.
Oh,
Or think about the shifting of the seasons. Why does the Earth suddenly die and freeze for months, taking away your food supply, only to eventually thaw out again?
Without an understanding of the Earth's axial tilt, winter basically feels like the literal end of the world.
It's an overwhelming cognitive load.
Just massive.
What's fascinating here is how the text frames these very early narratives. It argues that these stories weren't meant to be religious doctrine.
At least not in the way we think of doctrine today, right?
Right. They were literal survival tools. They were used to explain danger, create a sense of order, and inject meaning into a world where there seemingly was none.
Because if the thunderstorm is just random atmospheric violence,
You are entirely powerless,
yeah,
and that powerlessness leads to panic. But if the thunderstorm is an angry entity in the sky, well, maybe you can appease it.
maybe you can learn its rules.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It gives you a psychological sense of agency.
And that agency lowers the panic, which allows you to actually function and, survive. I'm trying to make this a bit more relatable to how human psychology operates today. Is this kind of similar to how a parent might tell a child a slightly exaggerated, simplified story to keep them away from a hot stove?
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Like a parent might say, don't touch the stove, the fire monster will bite you.
Right.
The parent's goal isn't to maliciously lie to the kid or to establish some lifelong theology of fire monsters.
No, of course not.
The goal is just to use a story as a protective survival tool against a very real danger that the kid's brain just isn't developed enough to comprehend through, like, the lens of thermodynamics.
Yes, the intention is protection and order. Early humans were basically telling themselves the fire monster stories to survive the overwhelming phenomena of the natural world.
It was a coping mechanism.
Exactly, a coping mechanism for existence. The psychological relief of having an explanation, literally any explanation, was biologically advantageous.
It kept them alive.
It did. But the text doesn't stop at the creation of the stories. It asks us to look at the brutal mechanism of time.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting because I'm kind of stuck on something here.
What's that?
Well, if we assume the grandmother who first invented the lightning god story knew she made it up as a tool to calm everyone down,
Hmm.
how do we forget that we invented our own rules?
Yeah.
Like, how do these functional survival tools transform into massive stone temples, elaborate rituals, and sacred scriptures where people are actually punished for stepping out of line?
The author provides a single-word answer to that transformation, actually. Fossilization.
Fossilization.
Okay.
Over immense stretches of time, we're talking thousands of years, civilizations essentially shaped themselves around these stories. The stories hardened.
They became concrete.
Right. They morphed sequentially. They started as simple stories to explain the unknown, and then those stories became strict rules for how to live within that newly ordered world.
And then
From rules, they transformed into unquestionable authority.
I do want to push back on that process a little bit, though.
Sure.
The human fingerprint just vanishing entirely feels like a massive leap. Let me pitch an analogy.
Go for it.
Think about a massive generational game of telephone.
Okay, telephone.
Yeah, so it's not just a message getting garbled across a room. Imagine a game of telephone that lasts for centuries. The first person whispers the original practical context, like the hot stove warning,
Right.
but by the time it gets passed down through hundreds of generations, the context of why it was said is completely lost.
So the people at the end of the line just receive this rigid, terrifying rule about a fire monster, and they have no idea it was ever just a metaphor to begin with.
That captures the sociological mechanism perfectly.
Yeah.
And it points directly to one of the most powerful quotes in Dick Matthews' preview.
Oh, which one?
He writes, "When enough people believe a story for long enough, it stops being seen as a story."
Wow. Yeah.
Time is the ultimate eraser of human fingerprints.
Yeah.
The first generation creates the tool. The second generation receives it as a cultural tradition.
And then the third or fourth.
By the third or fourth generation, a child is born into a world where this story is simply the environmental reality. It's taught to them right alongside gravity and the need to drink water.
So the origin context is just completely wiped away.
Exactly. It totally dissolves the line between human creation and divine origin. If a belief has been held by your ancestors for 50 generations, it carries the weight of the cosmos.
It's just a fact of life at that point.
Right. It's no longer perceived as a human construct. It is absolute truth. And the transition from a hunter-gatherer mindset to a complex agrarian society really accelerates this.
Because you have more people.
Yes. When you settle down, build cities, and store grain, you need robust societal rules to keep thousands of people living together without killing each other.
Which means the stories that started as tools to protect us from the chaotic dangers of nature suddenly became tools used to organize massive populations.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we're looking at an impartial historical reality presented in the text. The transition from survival to control.
Survival to control.
Yeah. As societies grew more complex, belief became inextricably intertwined with authority. We see this all over the historical record.
Right, because once a narrative is deemed unquestionable,
Anyone claiming to speak for that narrative gains unquestionable power over the masses. Kings began ruling, quote, by divine right.
and priests began speaking on behalf of God. It's like the ultimate trump card in human governance. I mean, if the person sitting on the throne is speaking for the creator of the universe, suddenly disagreeing with them isn't just a political difference of opinion.
No, it's heresy.
Right. It is an existential threat to the fabric of reality. But I have to ask about a specific phrase the author uses here. Doubt became dangerous.
Yes, that's a key concept.
Does the text suggest that early leaders actively schemed to use the gods for oppression? Like, was this an intentional corruption of the stories?
Well, the text leans heavily away from the idea of a malicious mastermind.
Okay.
It views this entirely through an impartial, structural lens. A fragile early civilization needs extreme cohesion to survive famines, wars, and disease.
And shared belief provides that cohesion.
It's the glue. Therefore, anyone who questions the shared belief threatens to dissolve the glue.
Always.
If the entire city believes that the harvest depends on appeasing the rain god, the one citizen openly questioning the rain god is seen as a literal threat to everyone's food supply.
So the danger of doubt is just a natural byproduct of a society clinging desperately to the only order it knows.
Exactly that. The society built its entire foundation on an unquestionable story. And naturally, those in positions of power benefited immensely from that dynamic.
Right. It solidified their status.
It solved the messy problem of succession. It prevented constant civil war. They fiercely protected the unquestionable nature of the story because it protected their reign.
Wow. So the protection became a cage. The story we invented to keep ourselves from going mad during a thunderstorm became the justification for locking people up for asking questions.
Yes, and understanding how ancient survival stories became weaponized authority brings the discussion directly to the author's primary challenge for the modern reader.
Which is pretty intense.
It is. The text emphasizes a very explicit warning from the author. Dick Matthews writes that The Gods We Made is not a book of conclusions, it is a book of confrontation.
Meaning the author isn't going to hand you a neat little summary of what you should believe now.
No, not at all.
Instead, he challenges you, the reader, to step back. Just far enough to ask 3 very specific, very uncomfortable questions about your own deeply held beliefs.
Let's lay those 3 questions out because they form the absolute core of this analysis.
Okay, let's hear them.
Question number 1. Who created the first version of what I believe?
And notice the phrasing there, not who handed it down to me, but who created the first version.
Right. It demands you trace the lineage of the idea all the way back to a human mind in a specific historical context.
Okay, and question number 2. Why was it created?
Was it created to explain a terrifying mystery, to provide comfort in the face of inevitable mortality?
Or maybe to establish a societal rule for hygiene that was necessary at the time.
Exactly. Identifying the functional why demystifies the belief. It grounds it in human necessity.
Which brings us to question number 3, which honestly might be the most challenging one. Who benefited from it becoming unquestionable?
This raises an important question about our own psychological reactions to this text.
Yeah, because it's heavy.
It is. The preview observes that when confronted with these 3 questions, many people will experience an immediate activation of their defense mechanisms.
Which makes total sense. I mean, if your entire worldview, your community, your sense of self are built on an unquestionable foundation.
Examining the concrete of that foundation feels exactly like tearing down your own house.
It feels like a direct attack, even if it's just an inquiry.
But the author points out that while some will recoil from these questions, others will experience what he calls a quiet recognition.
A quiet recognition. I like that.
It's a realization that they have never been asked to examine belief through this specific historical lens before.
Like they've always sensed the human fingerprints on the rules, but never had the permission to point them out.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? If we synthesize this entire journey we've been on today, it's clear that the book isn't just an ancient history lesson.
No, it's very much in the present.
It's an active confrontation. It's asking us to trace our own accepted truths back to their deeply human roots.
To briefly recap the thematic journey we've taken, we started with early humans, terrified of the lightning, desperately trying to lower their cognitive load by inventing stories.
Right.
We watched as time acted upon those survival stories, causing a slow hardening into unquestionable societal rules.
Then those rules got weaponized.
Exactly. They were co-opted by authority, leading to kings ruling by divine right and the suppression of doubt. And finally, we arrived at the modern confrontation of our own post.
It's an immense amount of historical and psychological territory to process.
It really is. But for you listening right now, the ultimate value here isn't in abandoning everything you know. The value is in the approach itself.
Having that framework.
Right. Approaching long-held information and societal norms with a fresh, deeply curious perspective is a superpower. It allows you to separate the useful tools from the invisible cages.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final lingering thought, something that builds directly on Dick Matthews' premise but brings it right into your living room today. Think back to our opening image. Ancient humans standing in a field, terrified by the chaotic, overwhelming reality of a thunderstorm. They created unquestionable stories just to make sense of the noise and survive the panic. The natural world was their chaos.
Right.
Now look around you. We have largely conquered the mysteries of lightning and the seasons, but we are currently drowning in a remarkably different kind of chaos.
An information chaos.
Exactly. An overwhelming thunderstorm of information overload, technological acceleration, and just staggering societal complexity.
It's a lot to process.
So ask yourself, what unquestionable stories or absolute authorities are we collectively creating right now to help us make sense of the terrifying chaos of our modern world? And 1,000 years from now, who will be ruling by the divine right of the stories we are making up today?